Hello again, everybody. Part 2 of my Nilfgaard reveal. Right now, we're going to be going through the silver cards and the gold cards in the set. Part 1, if you haven't seen it, we covered the 3 leaders and the 18 bronze units. Now we're going to go into the 14 silver units and the 9 gold units in the set. Let's not waste any time, folks. Again, one more thing though, the values on these cards are not final. We may not see them as they are in the patch that we get when it comes, when Nilfgaard comes. So keep that in mind. But we'll go right into the cards here. The first thing is Treason. This is Nilfgaard's special card. So much like Nature's Gift, much like Restoration, Nilfgaard has its own silver special card as well, and it is Treason. Move a spying opposing non-gold unit to your side and add 4 to its strength. So if you remember the bronze cards from part 1, you imagine you play an ambassador and it plays one of your cards on the board. Of course, it is a 2 strength disloyal unit. You play Treason on it, it comes back onto your side of the board and is now 6. Now this is a way for you to get these spies back on your board for purposes of replaying them, for purposes of not basically not having the opponent have that strength, so take away a lot of the risk. It does cost you a card, it does cost you a very competitive silver slot, and the leader John Calvet does a very similar thing, although it doesn't give it the bonus. It does affect all disloyal units on the board. So I wouldn't run this card in a John Calvet deck because I feel like, much like how Dagon allows you with weather flexibility, how you may choose to free up that silver spot for Aeromancy if you're playing Dagon, you might want to free up your silver spot by not playing Treason if you're playing John Calvet. So, but in this case, Treason is not, at first glance, I feel like kind of at first glance on paper, it's a card that isn't offering that huge a swing unless you're playing, now the spies in Nilfgaard, the highest strength spy is 8, unless your opponent has a way of buffing a spy or choosing to buff a spy. Generally, you won't get a huge swing. I feel like a much higher strength. The value is the fact that you can replay the card on your board if you use the new decoy, for instance, or you have another way of interacting with the cards on your board, or you just want to get that strength back. It doesn't count as a disloyal card anymore when you pull it back. So cards that register disloyal, that register on disloyal cards, won't get that benefit anymore. Personally, I don't think this card's worth the silver slot. I think that there's much better silvers to choose from. Even some neutral silvers are better. I just don't know if it fits in a deck that needs to have like a lot of strength, a lot of power from its silvers. It's a cool card. I like the art. The silver, the guy biting into the crown here, premium style, probably is going to look kind of gross. I bet, just drooling all over that money. But there is your special card for silver. Fake Siri. This is a really popular card, and I think this card's very cool. I think it has some weaknesses and it has some insane strength. Fake Siri is a 3 strength siege unit disloyal card. You play it on your opponent's side of the board. Every turn it is on your opponent's side of the board, it gains 1 strength. When that person passes, regardless if you pass first, Fake Siri packs her bags, comes on home. Come on home to me, Fake Siri. She comes home and she brings all the strength that she's been building with her. So your opponent is really never gaining anything as it eventually comes back. The risk is your opponent has total influence over Fake Siri, can affect it, can lock it down. There is a card that does lock abilities from appearing. Basically, there's a new brand of card, and you'll see more cards that do that. There's a new brand of card that effectively silences a card's ability without actually affecting the buffs on it. So if you lock Siri, you would really, and visually, literally kind of chain her up, as the visuals are going to be a chain and a lock over that card. So when we get into that card, I'll reference this card again. However, if your opponent doesn't really have an immediate answer, it starts to be looming dread, much like an Ancient Foglet tends to be. Monsters are very strong against this card, as there are consume mechanics that you can use to basically take that strength for yourself and never be a threat again. But I think there's going to be some really cool applications for this card. But otherwise, it is a card. It's kind of a ticking bomb, a very slow and kind of looming dark cloud. If I pass now, my opponent gets this much. Every turn I play longer and longer, my opponent gets more value for it if you don't have an answer. And do you normally have answers for cards on your side of the board? Sometimes it's hard to influence those things. So we will see. I think the meta will dictate if this card is good, but it's definitely a unique card. Props to the dev team for designing something so unique. It's basically, this is the kind of cool stuff you can do with disloyal cards that don't necessarily draw you a card. You get the value back, but there's still a risk. Very cool card, Fake Siri. One of my favorites design wise. I'm going to say his name is Kalak. We're going to go with that. 4 strength melee card. Adds 4 strength to a non-gold unit on your side and gives it a shield very similar to Quen. So this card is a real protector. He buffs much like a Blue Stripe Scout, plus he has a Quen built into it, baked right into it. A card that does a little bit more than bronze. The value of the Quen shield remains to be seen. I think this card may have a place. I think that if you have a lot of units that you need to protect or you need to live a little bit longer, you have that sort of influence over it. Perhaps if you anticipate weather on a unit that can't protect itself from weather, this will protect it. If you're anticipating removal and it hasn't been removed yet, this card can protect it. And there are talks about Quen affecting units in your hand. I am not sure if that's in this patch. I'm not sure if that's going to be a finalized mechanic, but we did talk about it, and we can talk about what we talked about because, as we said, it's embargo o'clock. So if you can do that, you have a unit that comes down with 1 Quen, they pop it, and then you have Kalak to provide a backup Quen. You don't have Kira Metz. It's not Northern Realms, so it could be that this is the card that protects it. I am not thrilled about the card. I think that I need to see a great application for it before I become a believer. It really sucks if you pull this card out of your deck through Emissary, or there's another card, Joachim DeWitt, that pulls cards out of the top of your deck. Lots of great deck thinning cards in Nilfgaard, but if this happens to be the first card that you get pull out, value kind of stinks. 4 strength on a silver is not much you can do about it. So it will be good in some situations and not good in some situations, as cards are. I'm not personally sold on this card. I think that there's much better silver cards to choose from, but I would love to be corrected, and I'm looking forward to seeing other people's takes on it. Swears is another cool concept card. 4 strength melee card. Move all instances from an opposing non-gold unit from your opponent's deck into their graveyard. So very interesting card, and I'm going to use Skellige for both examples on how this card can be good and not good. It can be not good in that Skellige wants you to put stuff in their graveyard. You don't draw those cards anymore, but they're in the graveyard. It's good, though, if you put it on a card like a Medic. So let's say they've played Priestess of Freya. You play Swears. Their other 2 Priestess of Freya, if they're in the deck, they're gone, and they're not going to ever get them again. So I think that there's applications for Swears. I think that this is really a meta card. This is a reaction to the meta card. If there's a bronze card that is basically like out of control, Swears is the answer. If that bronze card doesn't actually, like, it's not like Alba Pikeman that pull all of their cards. But if your Northern Realm opponent's playing Reaver Hunters, for example, Reaver Hunters, before they get a chance to go into your opponent's onto the battlefield, they're already in your opponent's graveyard. So I think that there is definitely reactions to some metas in which Swears is powerful, and I think that in any meta where running lots of medics or running lots of resurrection cards or cards that, and I think that resurrection is changing. I think Skellige, they're going to be the masters of resurrection. Northern Realms not so much. If you're just worried about a bronze card in general, Swears is your answer. This one is a tricky one to evaluate. I really got to say, I really think it's going to matter on what ends up being really, really strong. And there are a lot of changes in the patch, cards that already exist getting changes, a bunch of other cards being added to other factions that are not Nilfgaard, and Nilfgaard itself, a new faction coming into a meta that has never known it before. This one's really up in the air for me. Swears. He starts at a really low value, so I have a feeling the dev team think that this ability is quite strong, and I think that remains to be seen. And I love the art. Swears. What do you know? What did you say about my mother? That's what he's saying. Swears. I love it. Vanamar. This card is a bomb. 4 strength siege unit. Counts as a mage as well for future mage interactions, of which this patch I do not believe has it. And I also don't know if that tooltip is correct, because he doesn't look like a mage to me. Maybe I don't know something about this card lore-wise. Vanamar, wherever he is, deck, hand, graveyard, whatever you want, gains 2 strength whenever another card in either player's hand is revealed. Over the course of the game, imagine you're playing Emir, imagine you're playing Alchemists, imagine you have a way of revealing a number of cards. Let me just tell you right now, in the gameplay video against Merchant, he plays this card for 20, and it's in round 2. So this guy can be saved up and be a bomb in round 3, I am a little concerned about that, I gotta say. I gotta see how strong this guy ends up being and how dangerous he ends up being. But if you get card advantage, and you might be able to, there are ways Nilfgaard can do that, as they are, they're very spy-like, and they do have cards that draw cards. So if you can gain card advantage on your opponent and you play this card last, it could be a bomb. But just, pay mind. I think this card's going to be really strong. I think this card might be kind of Grave Hag levels of strong right now in this current patch, how Grave Hag works. Actually, I don't know how Grave Hag works in the new patch, but I'm saying that as Grave Hag was, or even how Madman Lugos was, this guy could be a real bomb, and he's a silver slot. Look out for this guy. It remains to be seen if these values are low enough. But even at 2, starting at 4, this guy gets out of control. There's a lot of cards that reveal cards, and it's either player's hand. Keep that in mind. This guy comes down for huge amounts if you're playing Emir. Definitely a card in an Emir deck. Ox, one of the 2 Witchers that joined Letho, who is also a card, as you saw in the collection image that I have at the beginning of these videos. Ox is your first new Witcher card. So check out your Swallow Potions, check out your Thunderbolt Potions. You do have more Witchers to use them on. 5 strength range row. Lock a non-gold unit on the battlefield, and then it explains what locking is, and I will do that as well. A locked unit loses all tokens. So when they're talking about tokens, they're not talking about Odim Shadows. They're not talking about Woodland Spirits Wolves. They're talking about tokens as in the visual effect type things. So we're talking about Resilient. We're talking about Weather Immune. We're talking about Quen. We're talking about, I think those are the main ones. I think those are the main ones specifically, but, and the abilities, of course, that it has. So in the case of Clan Du Moon Pirate Captain is a great example. That card gets buffed every time you discard a unit, right? If you lock that card, it no longer gets buffed anymore. So this is effectively a silence that doesn't remove buffs. So don't get your Hearthstone brain confused on this one. It doesn't remove buffs, but it does remove abilities. There's value in that. The dev team has him clocking in at 5. I wasn't positive about this card being exceptionally strong, but locking a unit definitely is not, it definitely has strength, right? So in the Clan Du Moon Pirate Captain's case, you basically have restricted me to playing a below average bronze card. There are a lot of cards that have really strong effects, a lot of slower cards, I think, cards that have effects after they're on the board that need to be minded. So Ox may have, again, it's very meta dependent, very much like Swears. Is there a card, like a silver card or a bronze card, that is really a pain to deal with? This is your solution. This is a solution. And there's a neutral card. You can see it above me here. Actually right here. That's Cleaver above me. We're going to talk about him in another video, but he's a neutral card that also helps locking units. So you will have options in the neutral space to also do that, but Ox will do it for you in the Witcher world. The Nilfgaard world, I mean to say. It's all in the Witcher world. Joachim de Wet. Now, I like this card a lot. This is a 5-strength disloyal melee unit. Play the top non-gold unit in your deck and add 10 strength to it. And this card could already be a card that buffs itself. So imagine grabbing, here's the scenario I want you to picture, and you'll see this in my gameplay video. You have a couple disloyal cards on the field already. Do you remember Emperor Brigade from the first part of the video? He was a 6-strength melee unit that gains 3 strength for every disloyal unit on the board. If Joachim de Wet pulls him, he comes out, he gets buffed, and then he gets buffed again for the low price of 5 strength on your opponent's board, which also activates a bunch of other abilities and disloyal perks as well. I think this card is absolutely worth a silver slot. I think a lot of Nilfgaard cards will run this card, and it thins your deck. This guy does a lot of stuff for you. One of my favorite cards in the set, Joachim de Wet. It is pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't have any effects that should be very confusing. Basically, you get a huge bonus. You want to be careful about playing this card first in case you have cards that interact with other units on the board. But other than that, you got to build your deck a little bit. Make sure that this guy is going to be as high value as possible. But you run stuff like Emperor Brigade, because the Emperor Brigade, I do believe, is triggered automatically by Joachim on the board. So it comes out at 9. It comes out at 19. Give your opponent 5 strength, 14 strength silver, and that's where he starts. So he can be much better than that. And he can pull silver cards as well. Keep that in mind too. Really good card. I think this card's pretty strong, and I think you're going to see this, especially at the beginning. On paper, looks pretty good. I think this card's quite good. Cynthia, this card is a really cool card. I don't know if it's a great card, but it's a really cool card. So Cynthia is a mage. She's a 6 strength ranged unit. When you play it, she draws you a card if possible. So you draw a card, and then you create a card in your opponent's hand called the Guardian, and then you reveal that card so you don't forget he has it, or she. Now the Guardian is a 6 strength unit that starts with Quen. So it's not an easy unit to deal with, but not an imposing amount of strength. Plus, you got a card. You drew a card. This is a unit that is loyal, that draws you a card, but gives your opponent a card as well. So the turn advantage is parity, but you know exactly what kind of card you're giving your opponent. A 6 strength unit that is a melee unit, a 6 strength melee unit with Quen on it. So you need to do a little bit of evaluation if it's worth drawing a card, but you pay the price when you do that. But it thins your deck. Keep that in mind. Thinning your deck, there's a lot of cards now that thin your deck. Nilfgaard might actually get away with a deck that's larger than 25 because you have so many cards that pull cards out of your deck. This is actually starting to look like a card that you would put in that kind of deck. You run on 26, 27, 28 cards, and you can still go through all of those cards. Cynthia helps you do it, but you got to pay a little bit of a price as well. I think it remains to be seen if this card is very good, but it also counts as a reveal. So if you're playing a card like Vanhamar, you are seeing a card that is now even stronger because you are revealing a card, and that card is revealed in the opponent's hand. Anytime it's revealed, remember, this guy keeps creeping and creeping. So there's Cynthia for you. Once again, there is the Guardian, a 6 strength melee unit that starts with a shield, a Quen shield. So immediately dealing with the card. Now, I do not know at the time of this recording if this unit, when you play it, counts as a disloyal unit, even though your opponent is playing it from his hand, his or her hand. So that remains to be seen, but I think, so that obviously affects the value of the card and the deck you kind of play it in. You're trading 6 for 6. I really think this remains to be seen. I think as far as deck thinning, I think this might be like a King of Beggars type sleeper card. I think you're giving your opponent a fairly decent card. Like, you're giving your opponent a bronze level card. I think that a 6 strength unit with Quen built into it is about a bronze, I think, roughly. Because if you don't interact with it, it's going to stay the way it is. Whereas you're playing a 6 strength silver card that draws you a card. So I think it's probably better than I think it is. I don't know if I'm rushing to put this in my deck. It's an epic card as well. I'm not talking about rarity very much because I think all that is very subject to change as well. I think there's a legendary card in here that maybe isn't, is kind of your LAS type legendary. You'll see. But that's Cynthia for you. Serret is your other Witcher friend of Letho, School of the Viper here, being represented in a 6 strength melee unit, Witcher unit, so is buffed extra by Thunderbolt Potion and by Swallow Potion. Choose an opposing non-gold unit and remove 1 strength from it for each revealed card in both players' hands. I think this card's a little on the weak side. So it can be a 6 strength unit that if you have 4 revealed units in each hand, now you're basically at the value that Sheila starts at. Sheila, Northern Realm card, that is a 6 strength range unit that removes 4 strength from the board. The ceiling is higher. He can end up being closer to like a buffed Brienne, but I think that's kind of the level you're going to find this guy at. Plus, he is the bonus of being a Witcher, so you can buff him and he can be better than a normal card can be if you're running buffs. But I do think that the card is okay. I think that if you're running removal, you might want to run Merc to Braca just because of the flexibility. But I think it can be okay. I think it can be okay. Moving right along, we have Peter Sar Gwenlev. This is a 7 strength melee unit that resets a non-gold unit to its base strength. So in a world where buffs are better, and I think buffs are going to be better, I think buffs are going to have a much higher value than they currently have. This card it's like a shackles with built-in shackles that doesn't actually change status. But I think that if you're, let's say you were playing against like Skellige or another class another faction that does a lot of buffing that can get away with it. So weather immune units in particular is what I was thinking of when I'm thinking of a ship. I'm thinking of kind of how the spotter works in Nilfgaard, a 6 strength weather immune unit that can have a very high ceiling. Peter basically comes in and stops that from happening. Another very meta-dependent card, where on paper, you have to have a board that you can be like, oh, right, it's that tactic. At least Peter will work against that. So I think that Peter is going to be one of those cards that are going to be solutions to strong things in the meta. Right away, right out the gate, it remains to be seen. I think there's going to be a meta in which Peter is useful, and there's going to be matchups, in particular against Nilfgaard, that runs this card that's going to make it very unfavorable for you if that's your game. Let's say you want to abuse the monster's passive by playing a unit, buffing it up, and keeping that unit. Peter comes along and removes all those buffs on it, and it doesn't matter if you're keeping that card anymore. So there's that. I think that he'll have a place in a meta that has incredibly high buffs, and I think that it probably makes a monster's matchup a little less favorable if you want to be abusing that passive in that way. I like this card okay. I like it okay. I think it definitely has a place. Moving right along, Albric. This is a cool card. 8 strength siege unit. If possible, draw a card, and then your opponent draws a card and reveals it. So this card is kind of like Cynthia in that it draws you a card. It's a loyal unit that draws you a card. It thins your deck in that way because it is drawing you a card. It is also thinning your opponent's deck, so instead of giving your opponent a card like a fixed card, like the Guardian, your opponent gets to draw a card, but you get to see that card, and that is information. And it also counts for revealing mechanics as well. I think this card is better than Cynthia, generally. You get more out of it. You get to know what's going on with your opponent's deck a little bit more, and you may draw a card that... I think that the Guardian is middling as far as power level and usefulness to your opponent. But I think this card is... I think that they're balanced very well in between them. As opposed to giving your opponent fixed strength, you give your opponent more cards out of your deck. At least in Cynthia's case, you're not thinning your opponent's deck for them. So I think that Albric, he's better strength-wise, and he offers you more information, but at the cost of thinning your opponent's deck. I think in a decision-making process, you could make a case for either one of them. The strength difference isn't that swingy. The benefit is higher in some cases for you with Albric, and it's higher in some cases for Cynthia. I think, actually, the more I think about it, maybe I like Cynthia more than this card. I don't necessarily like helping my opponent thin their deck, but we're in a meta right now where that is really strong, although I struggle to find a situation where that kind of thing wouldn't be really, really strong. So there's Albric for you. I'm probably going to come back and look at these cards again, especially when the cards are out and we can play with them a little bit more. But I'm actually very interested in finding out what other people think, which card is better, Cynthia or this card, Albric. Very cool situation to be in. Cantarella, this is a really good one. 8 strength, this little card. This is your true Nilfgaard spy. This is a card that you play disloyally that draws you a card, straight up. So your Nilfgaard spy reads, look at the top card in your deck. You may place it at the bottom of your deck and then draw a card. So this is very much like Stennis is. Now Stennis, I think this card is going to get changed because I know for a fact that spies are riskier to play. They have higher strength. For instance, Stennis is 12 now. If you haven't gotten the note or the memo from anybody else, you're getting it from me. Stennis is 12 now and he's immune to weather. Cantarella is 8 and she's not immune to weather. And she does very much what Stennis does. Draws you a card, and you have a choice between a card you know and a card you do not know. Now, the interface was kind of janky for this one, so you had to, if you clicked the card that you saw, you actually put it at the bottom of your deck, and if you canceled the draw, anyway, they're going to fix it. I don't even know if I need to explain why it was janky, but keep in mind that be careful of what it says. Be careful of when you play this card, be sure that you know what you're doing with the card that you're looking at. It's not as clear-cut as Stennis, where you have a card down and a card up. Maybe they end up doing that. Maybe that's how they end up doing the interface. But Cantarella, really good spy, especially when you compare them against how spies were changed. Possibly best spy in the game, because it's the lowest risk one. Also, you know what you're doing with the card that you see as well. So it's a little riskier. Also, the art is really cool. You can see she's flirting with the guy, but she's got her hand going for the information. So it's really cool. It's a really cool spy card, really cool flavor. Yeah, powerful women in the world. You got to do it. Asir Var Anahid. This is a 9-strength siege unit. Legendary. This is the legendary silver, and I have mixed feelings about this one, but not about the art. It's amazing. So she is a mage, and you choose 2 cards from your opponent's graveyard, and then you put them back into your opponent's deck. So you do the opposite of thinning the deck. You actually make it worse in that you can pick cards in the graveyard that maybe they don't need anymore, or counteract the thinning. So you play this on round 2 when there's cards in the graveyard. If you suspect that thinning the deck or a deck thinning meta is really powerful, this card is quite good. She starts at 9 though, but if you do it to 2 cards, if you put 2 cards back in your opponent's deck, now she's 5. So is it really worth it? Do you just now she has the flexibility of being played just as a 9-strength silver, so below average. But if you just need 9, you can use that. So there's the flexibility, and that's how it works. But it's just a very interesting, very complex, probably why it's a legendary card, very complex way of thinking. You need to really understand the meta, how graveyard play is going to go, the new cards and how they work. Definitely has a stronger matchup in Skellige in that you take the options out of the graveyard and put them back in the deck. Look at Queen's Guards as a very loose example. The Queen's Guards now they're not going to come back anymore. You got to redraw them, and you're probably not going to want to draw them. So that's one example where this card is pretty good, but I struggle to think of a ton of examples. So I don't think this card is great for a legendary card. I think it's maybe could be a little stronger. Our mileage may vary. We may see different things when we play it. Also, the value may not be final, and it's definitely unique. It's definitely a unique effect. So I'll give it all of those points. I'm not rushing to put it in any deck. Finally, a face you may be familiar with, Fringilla Vigo. She is the Jutta Endamoon, or the Sheldon Skaggs, or the Manticore of Nilfgaard. Personally, I'm disappointed because I think that Fringilla Vigo has more importance in the Witcher world and maybe deserves a little bit more than being a vanilla card. That's me personally. I think that you could probably, I've never heard of this character, and maybe I'm a bad Witcher fan. I've only read one of the books, and I've played Witcher 2 and Witcher 3. I haven't played Witcher 1. Maybe I would get to know this character, and this character is actually really cool in books, in the books or in previous games or some other lore. But I'll tell you that as someone who played the game in which Wild Hunt had inside it, basically Wild Hunt created Gwent, and Gwent is a product of Wild Hunt, and Fringilla Vigo is in Wild Hunt, and she does play a role in that game. I just expected her to be a bigger character because I knew the name immediately when I saw her. So I think that that's really my only criticism, because there's not much else to say about a 10-strength card that has no ability. What do you say? Have we enjoyed the silvers? Let's get into the golds right now. Yeah, I had to get that Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings track playing for these next 2 cards. Let's start it off with our first gold card, a common card. You get this out of the box, I believe. It is a gold common card. Now, this is not final. Perhaps this is not a common card. There were some cards that had the wrong frames in the build, so I'm not going to get too excited. But the idea of a common gold card out of the box and a gold special that is faction specific, there's a lot of new things about this card. But let's talk about Assassination. Destroy an opposing non-gold unit and then remove an amount equal to that unit's strength from a random non-gold unit on your side. This card, I think, is very strong because if you remove a 20 strength unit and you don't have 20 strength on your board, you're getting value. If you have a bunch of units on your board, like a 2 strength unit, and you remove a 20 strength unit, you're getting a huge amount of value. I used this card in the mirror against Merchant, and I was unlucky. I removed like a 21 strength unit from his board. I happened to have a 1 unit, or maybe there was like 2 units it could have hit, that it actually would have been equal value. But I feel like you can set it up so you're ahead after this card. I think this card is really strong. Worth a gold slot? Yes. I think a card that says destroy an opposing unit, end of sentence, destroy an opposing non-gold unit, period, full stop. Card's good. you can make it work really, really well. You might get caught by it. Much like Renew, you might get caught in situations where you're not happy about it, but I think Renew had a home. And I think this card's going to have a home as well. I think this card's going to see play. Whether or not it's common remains to be seen. But what a cool card. And the art's very ominous as well, the body being dragged away. But we're talking about Assassination, so we're talking about Assassins. Assassins of Kings. You have waited for this card, I think, big time. This card is Letho of Gulet, a Witcher in his own right, a Gold Witcher, no less, much like Geralt himself. He is a 1 strength, agile unit that can be played loyally or disloyally. When you play him on a row, he banishes all non-gold units on that row, and he adds their strength to himself. So let's talk about this card. There's so much to say about this card because you can play it loyally or disloyally. So let's look at the situation where you're playing it disloyally. You have banished every card on that row. Those cards are never coming back. Those cards are never triggering their abilities again. And in cases like the Neckers that come back after they're destroyed, you've silenced that as well. Just using a very loose example again, because I can't spend too much time on every single card, but definitely want to talk about this one a little bit because this is a really unique effect. Very cool design card. You're only giving your opponent 1 strength to do this, but you're giving them you're basically locking all that strength in a protected gold unit. So the risk is not insignificant, but it's not so bad in that you're only giving your opponent 1 strength, but they have to make him 1 because you can play it loyally as well. You can't make him too good. So we look at the card from a loyal standpoint. Let's say you have fake Siri on your board, or you have some spies on your board, or you have strength you want to protect, lots of huge buffs. You play Letho, much like how Karen works, very similar to how Karen works. It all goes into Letho, and then you bank that strength into gold as well. So I think that you have applications very flexible. It's really going to work on disabling, much like his assassination nature. He comes along and assassinates everything that he comes in contact with, and he walks away just flexing those giant pythons of his. Look at those arms. The dude lifts. So I think it's a really, really cool concept, and they gave Letho one of the most unique abilities in the game to date. So there's a lot of applications for this. I think it's definitely going to be a meta-dependent card, but I think you can run this card and make it very threatening as long as there are cards that have, slow cards that have persistent effects. Letho is going to come along and ruin your day, especially if you want to line up all your trebuchets, or you want to line up all your other units that trigger on pings or have multiple units, multiple effects on different units. Letho is going to come along and lock them all down. And you give your opponent 1 strength, and you give your opponent the golden strength. Lots of trade-offs. I think there's going to be so many great decisions you can make with this card. Every time you play this card, it's going to be different, and it's a really exciting card that I think Gwent needs. Love Letho, love the art, love the scene right out of the enhanced edition of Witcher 2. That CG scene where he's running and the ship is falling apart. He froze the ship and he's running across it. So great. Love the art. And he pops. He's got the red eyes. They did Letho justice, in my opinion. I think that he's not blowing your mind good. There is a card that I think does blow your mind and how good it is in these gold cards. But I think that as far as my satisfaction with the card, I'm satisfied. And I'm going to try him out. I'm going to play him. And I think that there's decks in which he's really good. I love Karen. So he's a little less than Karen raw strength. I got to move on. I could talk about this card some more, and I probably will. Let's move on, though. Vilgefortz, you've waited long enough. Once again, we have seen this art for a long time. Vilgefortz does not disappoint. He is a 4-strength siege unit. Destroy a non-gold unit. So we've already got 2 gold cards that destroy a unit, period. Destroy a non-gold unit. If it was on the opposing side, your opponent draws a card, and you see what card that is. If it was on your side of the board, you draw and play a card immediately. So 2 very different scenarios here. How important is it to destroy a unit on your opponent's board? Is it worth having your opponent draw a card? You get to see that card. You get to play around that card. You could have destroyed a huge card. It is a targeted removal. Again, the effect is very powerful when it's destroy a unit. So I feel like if you were running Assassination or this, you run this every time. I think that this card has the more flexibility and thus makes it stronger in its flexibility. But if you have like fake Siri played against you, is a great example. And I actually, in one of my gameplay videos, if I release this video, I think I do release this video. I don't think I completed that game with Grey Boxer, but I scorched my own Siri, and then I got to draw and play a card. Thins my deck. The card's probably better than what I killed. It could have been a weenie unit. It could have been my opponent's emissary or ambassador. It could have been a rot tosser cow carcass. In the mirror, this card dominates, I think, because of that fact. But there are other situations. You might get caught with this card where there's not a lot of great options, and then you have a 4-strength gold. But I think that you're going to have a lot of applications. This card is a really good card. One of the best cards in the set. Safely going to say that. Village of Forts. Love it. And the premium version of this card is psycho good. I'll see if I can show that to you at the end of this video. The premium version of Village of Forts. Very good. Zarthisius. This card's also, I think, a really good card. 5-strength siege unit. Look at the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. You may move one of those cards to the bottom of your deck. So let me tell you something. When you get to play this card and you're in the same room as your opponent, you can trash talk him or her. In my case, it was always him. But you can say, oh, that's a good card. I can't let you get that card. So there was like a lot of extra fun for this card in a situation where you can play and you can see your opponent and talk to them. But that aside, the eerie, ominous silence of knowing your opponent is seeing the card on the top of your deck and then denying you that card, and you don't know what that card is necessarily until you get through your deck. It's just like, what did he take away from me? What was I looking for? What was I waiting for? And was it that card? The card is just psychologically so good. But you also have a lot of denial. You can just tank, you can sink your opponent's win condition with this card. And you look at 2 of the cards, 2 chances to do it. So you are denying your opponent card. As a gold 5 strength, I think the effect is worth it. I think that you could play this card. I think it's really strong. I think that you are removing a card from your opponent's deck effectively unless it's a pure thinning deck. And I think the deck thinning got a little nerfed. I think it gets a little nerfed. Although Nilfgaard, I think, might be the best, might end up being the deck thinning kings. They may take that throne away from Scoia'tael. That might be the direction that they want to go with. And Zarthisius definitely punishes those who can't thin, because that deck, the heaviest card in the deck is the card that you see. Really cool card. Talking about really cool cards. Okay, so I have so much to say about Cahir. Cahir is a 6-strength melee unit. After 2 turns, both leaders will again be available for use. So, I love this card for a couple reasons. First of all, the art is maybe my favorite in the set. And the set has some amazing art, but I love this. Look at this. Graceful 2-handed swing, the nice ribbon of blood going by. Can't wait to see the premium version of this card. It was not available in the patch that we saw. Nilfgaard did get a set of premium cards, just like the other factions do have. But this was not one of them. However, I can't wait to see it. So you can do a couple things with this card. When you play this card on the board, your opponent, if they have not used their leader ability, has 2 turns to decide if they want to use their leader ability. You are influencing their plays heavily. Second of all, if you have already used your leader ability, you're going to get it back unless they find a way to deal with Cahir. Finally, if you're playing Emir, here's the combo I foresee. You play Emir, you see 2 cards in your opponent's hand. You play Cahir, and in 2 turns, you get to reveal 2 more cards in your opponent's hand. That's a really great way to start the game out. If you're looking at 4 cards in your opponent's hand, you force your opponent to use their leader ability or else not get really the risk that this card is proposing for you to get a very strong effect. And I think that the Nilfgaard leaders are much like the Scoia'tael leaders. They aren't blockbusters like Herald is right now, in that you're going to get a ton of value. But using them twice, I think that they're balanced a little bit lower, but I think that they're still, like, the caliber is still there. I think that they are very worthy of being leaders, and you don't have to run this card to make them good. I think that you can build some lines of play. I like the Emir play, personally. I think that, you know, Morvran's pretty good too, but the idea is you play them early. You find a deck you like where you want to play the leader ability early. You play this card, you force your opponent into making a decision. Maybe it's crap for them to use their leader ability, but it's still going to give them something and gives them, a turn, a card back, a turn. So Kahir's got a lot of application. All the gold cards in Nilfgaard are really good. I don't think there's really a truly terrible one, except for one of them. There is one bad one, but the devs all agree that it was bad, so I think he's going to get changed. We'll get to him eventually. Tigor Egebrocht. This card, I believe, was Austria's favorite card. Correct me if I'm wrong, Austria, but I think that you said that this was one of your favorite cards, or it was Michael D's favorite card. This card is a really cool card. So he's a 7 strength melee unit when you play him. If his condition isn't met, that's all he'll be. But if your opponent has not passed yet, he's a 22 strength gold unit. And then your opponent draws a card and he reveals it. But if he hasn't passed yet, so he's going to be able to use that card. So there's a lot of cool applications here, but you get to drop a 22 strength gold card, period. Much like destroy a unit, that's a very powerful effect. It's not very easily dealt with one card that you're giving your opponent. Do you want to let your opponent draw a card, assuming its effect always goes off and it's 22, so your standard gold card is about 12. A swing of 12, it's the benchmark you want to hit. So that's 10 more than that. So it's kind of on par with Aridin as he used to be. Spoiler alert, Aridin changed as well. So you have a card that's 22 strength, your opponent draws a card that probably isn't going to equal the value that you get from Tibor, which is equal to a 10 strength gold card, or it could. I think, man, there's so many situations here. I'm going on the fly on this one. I didn't write down or prepare notes, but I definitely think that this card is probably better than I think it is, and I think it's still decent. I needed to test this one out. This one is a card that needs to be felt, I think. Whether or not you can't hold it, or else it's just a 7 strength gold. That's like the coolest thing about it. You can't just chill with it. You can't use it as a bomb. It's prevented in that way. No Isengrim Syndrome on this card. But if you play it near the end of the game, maybe your opponent gets that card they've been dying for, or maybe you just sealed the deal with that extra strength that you didn't have in your hand beforehand. And it doesn't thin your deck to do it. There's just so much to say about this card. It's like they looked at so many different angles that were never approached before. I love the card's design. I am going to say that as far as unique cards, it's one of my favorite cards in the set, but I don't know how competitive it's going to be when there's so many great gold cards. But, you know, there's so many buts. I mean, I'm going to revisit this one. I don't know if I can grade this one right away. Vatir de Rideau. Now, in French, de Rideau means of the curtains, which I think is a great, I think that's right, which is a great name for an assassin, a guy that hiding in the curtains, right? He's hiding in the curtains. 7 strength ranged gold unit. Reveal up to 2 cards in your hand. Each card you reveal in your opponent's hand. So this guy is a good friend of Emir, I would say. I think that, you know, it's another card that reveals a lot of cards. So this is a card that helps you get Vanamar to an absurd amount of strength. Now you have to reveal cards of your choosing to your opponent. So you have a little bit of control over this one. You could reveal, you know, cards that you plan on playing next. They could be, you know, your 2 strength spies. You could play this first. So look at this card. Let's say you draw this card and Kahir, and you're running Emir. You look at 2 cards with Emir. You have 2 turns before Kahir triggers. One of them can be played with this. You reveal 2 more cards. Kahir triggers. You get to reveal 2 more cards. You're looking at almost your opponent's entire deck, and in the meantime, you could be playing Alchemists. It's nutty. You can see your opponent's entire hand. It remains to be seen. I really have a hard time thinking that that's not an amazingly powerful ability to look at that many cards in your opponent's hand. I really think it needs to be felt, but it seems really strong. I think Vatir is a top tier card, especially in an Emir deck. I don't know outside of an Emir deck, because you do have to show cards to your opponent, but you have control over it. I think this card is going to be one of the best cards in the set. I'm going to say that right now, though. I'm going to commit. I'm going to make a stance on this one. I love this card. Stefan Skellen. This card's pretty cool, too. 8 strength, ranged unit. Choose any card in your deck. Shuffle your deck and place that card on top. Very powerful ability. Doesn't draw you the card, but it ensures that the next card you draw is whatever card you want in the deck. This card's one of the best cards in the set. This card is up there. I mean, you basically you're assured to draw. If you have a card in your deck that if you said 100% of the games I draw this card in, it feels like my percentage of winning is higher, you can always draw that card. Any card, not non-gold, any card. This is one of the best cards in the set, for sure. 8 strength gold, it's not even that much of a trade-off. For an ability this powerful, I mean, the only catch is that you don't draw it, so you have to be in a position to draw a card. But you've seen these cards. You've seen cards that pull cards off the top of your deck, like Joachim de Wet. You have seen cards that draw you cards for sure, like Cantarella or any of the spies, the ambassador and the emissary. Bronze cards make this card so good. This card, you know, I don't know if it's the best card. It might be the best card. Stefan Skellen, representing that golden sun, holds it in his hands. Gonna get you. Last card. This was okay. So I'll preface this card. This general sentiment in the room about this card from devs and players alike was that he was very underpowered. So I don't think that this card is going to end up coming out like it is. But this card is a 9 strength. This is Menno Cohorn, we'll say. He's a 9 strength melee unit. Set the strength of all opposing non-gold spying or disloyal units to 1. So if you are, now your Nilfgaard, you only have a set amount of spies. 2 of them are 2s. 1 of them is 5. 1 of them is a gold, or the gold units don't matter. So 1 of them is 8 Cantarella, which is probably the best value you get out of it. And, you know, if you're buffing spies, then, you know, you might get more value. If your opponent is buffing spies, you might get more value out of it. But I don't think he comes down at 9. You might get a value of 7 or 8 generally. That doesn't make him bad. I just think that he's underwhelming. I think for a gold card, he's just not competitive enough. It's not that you're not going to get the value of a gold. Like, he's Philippa for spies, you know? Like, it's however, whatever that means to you, you can be excited about that if you want, but I don't know if he's going to stay like this. We might get the patch with him as is in this state. He might be stronger than 9. He might do something completely different, but the general sentiment in the room was that there was something about this card that felt, you know, bad. So there's that. But that's Menno Cohorn. I do believe that is the last card. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for the Nilfgaard card reveal. 44 cards in 2 parts. We covered the leaders and the bronze cards in part 1, and we just finished covering the silvers and the gold cards in this act of the series. Hope you enjoyed the reveals. Hope you like some of the cards you see. Nilfgaard is a very fun faction. Lots of great unique cards, very powerful gold cards, very interesting bronze cards, and a couple of silver choices to make. I think a lot of great decisions, some of them more competitive than others, I think, but I think that they definitely are all very interesting cards. Not a lot of cards to really kind of shrug your shoulders at. I love this set. This faction is bringing a lot of fresh ideas to Gwent, and cannot wait to play this deck. Cannot wait to play this faction, and it's only going to be a matter of days, but it has been embargo day, and I hope you enjoyed this. Maybe you watched this on the day, January 30th. If so, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me on my foray into YouTube, and I'll be making some more videos. We have more cards to talk about. We have neutral cards. Northern Realms, Monsters, Scoia'tael, and Skellige all receive new cards in this patch that is upcoming. If that video isn't up now, it will be up soon. I look forward to sharing that stuff with you, but until then, thanks for watching, everybody. Let's go. Praise the golden sun. Praise the Emperor. The Emperor. See you next time, everybody.